It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Thanks for tuning in on WHP 580 AM and iHeartRadio and News Talk 104.1 FM and 1600 AM on WEJS out of Williamsport, Pennsylvania. If you'd like to watch some prior podcasts of the show or take a look at some great merchandise, including our popular Right to Bear Arms muscle shirt and the We're Glad You're Our Neighbor, Just Please Don't Kill Us yard signs and T-shirts, go to the MarcScaringiShow.com website. And for more political and legal news throughout the course of the week, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Well, after the first break today in the show, we're going to have a special guest, State Representative Daryl Metcalf, who is working very hard in Harrisburg to try to reopen all of Pennsylvania. We'll hear from him in a bit. But first, it's Memorial Day weekend, the time to honor the brave men in the United States Armed Forces who have died in service to our country. You know, the irony for this Memorial Day weekend is that so many of them gave the ultimate sacrifice fighting for our freedoms in wars in lands all over the world, yet we American civilians have had our freedoms ripped from us by our own U.S. politicians back here in America. It is so sad. It puts me in the frame of mind of our melancholy and lugubrious former president from many years ago. I was in Gettysburg yesterday to help dedicate the reopening of Adams County. And as you know, Abraham Lincoln visited Gettysburg many years ago and offered a few remarks. So here is my updated Gettysburg address, the one I delivered yesterday at the ceremony or the dedication to reopen Adams County. And this will be my opening statement for the show. And then after the first break, we're going to have Representative Daryl Metcalf, and then we'll open up the show for questions and comments from the callers. So here goes. 12 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great political war, testing whether that nation or any commonwealth so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Just over 2 months ago, His Excellency, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, initiated an act of political, commercial, and legal war against his own people and the Constitution that is unrivaled in the history of this great Commonwealth. In response to a viral illness that for the overwhelming majority of the people is no more than a mild flu, His Excellency the Governor ordered the complete shutdown of hundreds of thousands of businesses in order to lock in of 12 million of Pennsylvania's proud and brave citizens. The governor's orders shocked the conscience of millions of Pennsylvanians. They caused the forced layoff of nearly 2 million workers and plunged our economy into another Great Depression. Businesses great and small, new and old, have been shutting down permanently as a result of the governor's act of economic suicide. These shutdown and lock-in orders constituted the single worst deprivation of the constitutional rights of the people of Pennsylvania and the long history of this great Commonwealth. The governor's actions should send chills down the spines of every Pennsylvanian. Our founding fathers, from William Penn to Dr. Benjamin Rush to James Wilson and to Robert Morris, are surely weeping in their hallowed graves. Pennsylvania's greatest founding father, Benjamin Franklin, once famously said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." But the rub's on us. These orders have provided no safety, only the deprivation of our ancient right to liberty. This illness is only harmful to a very small percentage of Pennsylvanians, the frail and the elderly, those with infirmities that already have put them on the precipice of eternity. While the governor has shut down and locked in the healthy and strong, his policies are killing our cherished elderly residing in the very nursing homes His Excellency the Governor is required by law to keep safe and secure. Yet the people are rising. We are throwing off the chains of slavery and servitude that have been wrapped around us by our cowardly governor. Unlike His Excellency, we have no fear. We will leave our homes, we will reopen our businesses, and we will restore freedom to Pennsylvania. We are met here today near a great battlefield of a long-ago war, fought for the liberation of an enslaved people. The sacrifice of those great men who fought for freedom so many years ago renews our spirit and reaffirms the righteousness of our cause to throw off the chains of our modern-day slavery. Had His Excellency the Governor not indulged our pleas for liberty by reopening Adams County on this very day yesterday, I have no doubt that the great men and women standing there with me, patriots all, would have done it for him. In his hysterical reaction to a mild viral illness, the governor decided he would deem which of our businesses are life-sustaining and which are not, and then shut down those His Excellency deemed to be unworthy of remaining open. So he shut down my business and many of yours, but kept open beer distributorships, candy stores, and yes, my hometown tobacco shop. And I'm sure you are all relieved to learn that His Excellency the Governor deemed that his former family business, Wolf Home Products, is life-sustaining. Yes, in the time of this great pandemic, that's exactly what we need. We all need new kitchen cabinets. Thus, my and your businesses were shut down, but Wolf Home Products has never stopped making kitchen cabinets, and they're available to you right now. If you'd like to ingratiate yourself with His Excellency the Governor, you're welcome to call Wolf Home Products at 1-800-388-9653 and order your new kitchen cabinets today. The governor's labeling those businesses life-sustaining and closing down so many of ours was an act of arbitrariness and capriciousness, the likes of which we have never seen before in our history or our law. We have great modern-day patriotic Pennsylvanians, however, like Brad Shepler, proprietor of Shep's Barbershop in Mechanicsburg, and my client Nicole Messino, proprietor of Giovanni's Media Barbershop in Media, who has valiantly sued this governor to reopen all of Pennsylvania, who have defied these unconstitutional mandates and have reopened their businesses. In doing so, they've restored our faith in the ancient spirit of Pennsylvania, independence, perseverance, and personal responsibility. No, we will not become servile and weak and live off the government checks that may never come anyway. We will go back to work. And we have watched as legislative leaders like the great state Senator Douglas Mastriano and State Representative Darrell Metcalf, who have sent bill after bill to His Excellency the Governor to reopen Pennsylvania. And so many of you, my listeners, and those who have attended the various rallies, you've petitioned this governor for a redress of the grievances of millions of Pennsylvanians to reopen Pennsylvania, restore your constitutional rights, and allow you to get back to work to provide for yourselves and your families. And in response, His Excellency the Governor showed no empathy, no mercy, and he gave no quarter. Instead, to paraphrase the great Thomas Jefferson, he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. In fact, His Excellency the Governor has threatened to send his state troopers to arrest and prosecute you and us and to revoke our licenses and put us permanently out of work. But in spite of all of this, you and I, we all remain undeterred. We will hold our ground, and we will do so peacefully, with a show of love of our ancient rights and our Constitution. So we gathered there yesterday in Gettysburg to dedicate the reopening of Adams County, and we continue our peaceful call, our plaintive plea for mercy from His Excellency the Governor that he reopen all of Pennsylvania. And as our greatest lawyer and statesman once intoned, it is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this here. We have come here to Gettysburg to rededicate ourselves to the eternal struggle for liberty and freedom. The brave men who struggled here so many years ago have consecrated this great place far above our poor power to add or detract. And yes, the world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they and you all have done here. And it is for us rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they and you who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead and from the devastation this governor has wrought to our businesses and our freedoms, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead and those businesses and freedoms destroyed by this governor shall not have died in vain, that this commonwealth under God shall the new birth of freedom, and that it begins right here in Gettysburg, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall be restored to Pennsylvania. So there you have the speech I gave yesterday in Gettysburg to rededicate, to reopen Adams County. And it was a wonderful day to be down in beautiful Adams County with fellow patriots, business owners, individuals concerned about their constitutional rights and wanting so much to reopen so they can provide for themselves and their families. We'll talk more about the governor's business closure orders, and we'll hear from our special guest, State Representative Darrell Metcalf, when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is a place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America and Pennsylvania first. And next up, State Representative Darrell Metcalf. Representative Metcalf serves in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. He's a member of the Republican Party and has represented the 12th Legislative District, serving parts of Butler County just north of Pittsburgh, my hometown, since 1999. He currently serves as the majority chairman of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. He's been a leader of the conservative movement in Pennsylvania for a few decades now, and he's keeping up the fight against Governor Wolf and his unconstitutional business closure orders and stay-at-home orders. And we're so pleased to have Representative Darrell Metcalf on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Good afternoon, Mark. Good to be with you.
Hi, Darrell. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. Now, you've been pretty busy over the past several weeks as our governor has first shut down most of Pennsylvania and, of course, now is in the process of opening up parts of it. But you kind of took him on directly. You have proposed an impeachment resolution to impeach our dear, beloved Governor King Tom Wolf I, as I'll call him. Representative, can you tell my listeners a little bit about your impeachment resolution, how you reached the decision to do it, what the status of your effort is?
Well, I'll tell you, I've actually, as former chairman of the House State Government Committee for 8 years prior to becoming the chair of this session of the Environmental Resource and Energy Committee, I had one of my staff working on articles of impeachment for Wolf for about 3 years ago due to his spending taxpayer dollars without authorization during the budget process by the General Assembly. Over the years that he's been governor, he has taken it upon himself to believe that he has the authority to spend hundreds of millions of dollars before we authorize it as a legislative body, which if you did that as CEO of a corporation, you'd be in prison if you did something like that, along with you'd be fired. So I had been, looking at the various abuses of power by this governor. I mean, during his first term of office coming in, he violated the Constitution 3 times within the first 3 months and went to court over 3 separate issues, lost 2 of the 3, and should have lost the 3rd if the Supreme Court would have had the backbone to actually rule according to the Constitution and the law. So when we entered this virus battle that we've been in over the last couple of months, and you had the most liberal governor in the country as designated by the Huffington Post a couple of years back. And he started to execute all of these executive orders that are normally directed at the executive branch to carry out the governor's wishes for his administrative arm of his executive branch to make sure they're enforcing the laws of Pennsylvania. But now, believing that he's been empowered by a couple of statutes that during an emergency declaration, he believes he can shred the Constitution to dictate to people that you have to be under house arrest, to dictate to people that you don't have the opportunity or you shouldn't have the right to go into the marketplace and exchange your labor for a wage so that you can put bread on the table for yourself and your family, to dictate to people on how you should dress when you go out into the public and that you should be forced to have to wear a mask, not because he thinks he can make us do it, but because he's threatening businesses with loss of licenses and fines if they don't impose his mandate to be required to wear a mask when you enter somebody's place of business. So when he started violating right after right after right, and we were pushing back from the legislature and trying to advance legislation that would overturn his actions, and we've seen, of course, a number of vetoes, as you're aware, of some of those bills. But ultimately, the only way to stop this guy, to stop Wolf, who's believing that he's now become dictator or king instead of governor, the only way to stop him is ultimately to remove him from office. But we do have a major uphill battle to climb with any impeachment because it's a tool that's seldomly used, as you know, in American history or in Pennsylvania history. But it is a tool that's at the disposal of the legislature to hold a governor, a secretary of the governor, a mayor. It's there to hold an attorney general like Kane, who was attorney general until she committed all those crimes and went to prison for it. I had an impeachment resolution that I introduced for her back during that time, which we ended up not using, but we were starting to move on. But so now with Wolf, he's violated right after right after right of our constitutionally affirmed God-given rights. And if that's not misbehavior in office, as we have charged to take somebody out of office through impeachment for, I don't know what would be.
Well, State Representative Darrell Metcalf, you've been on the governor's trail here from the beginning, and I'm so glad that you've stepped up and that you're pursuing this effort. You know, in your impeachment memorandum that you circulated to your fellow members of the House of Representatives, you talked about the mass deprivation of our fundamental constitutional rights, which you hit on beautifully here this afternoon. The lack of transparency about the waiver process, is the governor's failure to administer the unemployment compensation system, which has been an absolute disaster. But you also talked about his focus on restraining businesses is particularly disturbing, you say, as the majority of the deaths due to the pandemic have been residents of the long-term care facilities, and the government should have focused his attention there. And by the way, as you well know, the governor and his Secretary of Health, they have a statutory obligation to ensure the health and safety of our residents at our nursing homes. Can you speak to my audience a little bit more about your concern about the governor and the Secretary of Health's failures with regard to our nursing home residents?
Well, I think this is so tragic. When you look at the numbers, and the Speaker of the House, Mike Turzai, has been asking to try and get numbers nailed down from Wolf's Secretary of the Health Department. And finally, he finally got some of those numbers last weekend that he'd sent out and dispersed out to our caucus members in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And when you look at the numbers, which have been out there within the media also, but about 69% of the deaths in Pennsylvania have occurred in nursing homes. And the same and similar statistics were proving out in New York under Cuomo. And when you look at the policies that they were utilizing to actually put patients or residents who tested positive, to have those residents go back to a nursing home, subjecting those that we knew from all the stats coming out of Europe and Italy, out of China, we knew that those elderly patients with pre-existing conditions would be some of the most vulnerable. They should have been the ones that we were focusing our energy on with state policies to protect their health and to do it in a way that still protected their constitutional rights. But instead, they put those poor souls at risk, and 69% of the deaths occurring in nursing homes. I've been speaking within the caucus ranks in both written form and verbally when we have a chance to, and talking about our strategy to move forward. And I have called over and over for an investigation. We should be giving subpoena powers to all of our standing committee chairs. We should be investigating this thoroughly to find out what has happened beyond what we've seen in the media. We should ultimately from there make sure that what we ultimately find out and what evidence we uncover, we should ensure that the arm of the law is going to focus on creating an accountability measure for the people of Pennsylvania to actually make sure that those poor souls who lost their lives, that their families get to see justice occur, and that this man is not able to hide behind the office of governor and his secretary is not able to hide behind the office of secretary, but that with the policies that they enacted that bypass the legislative process of lawmaking, that bypass the regulatory process that's in place to make sure that regulations actually are sound, when they bypassed that and had one dictate after another, some of which they've reversed themselves on, we need to make sure that they are held accountable. And if there's been any criminal activity involved in this, any criminal laws that have been broken, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Well, you mentioned criminal activities, potential criminal prosecutions, but our State Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, has announced that he is undertaking a criminal investigation of the nursing home administrators to determine whether or not they can be charged criminally as a result of these horrible deaths that have occurred in our nursing homes. But that makes me wonder, well, what about the Secretary of Health and her policy to essentially pressure or force the nursing home administrators to accept into their homes patients recently released from the hospital infected with COVID-19? It seems to me if the Attorney General was looking for someone to prosecute or to investigate at least, he need not look very far. Your thoughts?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, announcing that he's going to be doing this, he's just trying to give political cover to Wolf and to his Secretary of Health when we've seen national news stories on how many deaths have occurred, when you have the governor of Pennsylvania, the governor of New York, that are putting out these dictates, these directives that once again are not something that's passed through in a policy change by the legislative body, that's the lawmaking body, and have not went through a regulatory process that all regulations need to go through, even when the legislature has passed a law and then the executive branch attempts to enact that law. You still have a regulatory process to make sure that the law is being complied with, supposedly. But when you have one man and one man secretary trying to create policy and bypass the people's elected representatives, this is what you get. You get very bad decisions that ultimately have cost so many souls their lives, and that now we have so much mourning that has went on and that will continue to go on, and we need to make sure that we see justice. We need justice for the individual citizens of Pennsylvania, that their rights are restored, that their right to socialize as they see fit. I mean, it's just beyond imagination that growing up in America, having served in the military, serving in the military because of my passion for liberty to defend the freedoms of my family, of my neighbors, of my fellow countrymen, and that after getting out of the military and serving in the legislature since 1999, 1998, when I was first elected, as you mentioned, that all of these years of swearing to uphold and defend the Constitution and fighting to restore liberties that have been lost over the years, that now we've seen such a violation of our basic liberties that I would have never dreamed that you'd have any elected official attempting to tell an individual citizen, you stay in your home. Don't you go talk to that person. Don't get within 6 feet of that person. Don't go to work. You're not allowed to go to work. If you go to work, we're going to cite you. Don't go for a ride in your car as that young lady down in York was, or you might be cited for just driving around your car when we told you should be on house arrest. I mean, this is outrageous. I can't believe more Americans aren't in the streets as we've seen happen in other nations over the course of the last decade when they've been protesting for their freedom. Americans need to get active, get vigilant, do it, as you said, peacefully. But we've had opportunities at the Capitol. There's going to be more opportunities. We're going to have a Second Amendment rally on June 8th on the Capitol front steps that Wolf tried to tell me that we're not authorized to have there, which I sent him a letter this past week notifying him that we will have that rally. We will not be stopped by him or anybody else from exercising our right to assemble, our right to freely protest, our right to stand up for our rights, especially our right to bear arms.
And you're hearing from State Representative Darrell Metcalf, just north, his district just north of Pittsburgh, a true hero and champion of our constitutional rights. And we thank you for all of your efforts, Representative Metcalf. I've got to take a commercial break, but I want to thank you for appearing on the show and keep up the fight.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for all the work you're doing, and just keep with it. And we'll see you shortly. I know you're planning on being at our Second Amendment rally to speak, and we look forward to having you there on that day and joining together to stand up for our freedoms.
I will do that. That's Representative Darrell Metcalf of the 112th Representative State Legislative District. We're going to take a brief commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
More of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about the governor's business closure and stay-at-home orders. We've been discussing this for over 2 months now, and we're not going to relent. We're not going to be deterred. We're going to keep up the fight. You just heard from State Representative Darrell Metcalf from the western part of the state, just north of my hometown, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's fired up, and he is fighting for your constitutional rights. So we thank him for all of his efforts, and we're so pleased to have him in the General Assembly, one of the few true champions of the Constitution. And he's right on all points raised. This has been the single worst mass deprivation of our constitutional rights in the history of our Commonwealth. It doesn't seem that the judiciary is all that interested in our complaints, but we will endeavor to persevere, as President Abraham Lincoln once said. And we've got a bunch of callers on the line, so we want to try to get to you. If you're on hold, stay on hold. We'll get to you in course. It looks like we have Jeff from Philadelphia. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. On May 20th, 2020, I filed a petition for immediate injunction pending appeal in case 2014-49 that requested every jurisdiction, for all jurisdictions of the United States based on a ruling in case 4:20 CV 0081, the United States District Court for Eastern District of North Carolina on 16 May 2020 by Judge James C. Deaver III, since that was against the Governor Roy Cooper, who was doing similar things to our current governor that made it illegal for you to practice religion. And he stated he's not going to appeal the decision. So that is settled law. Mr. Cutler had filed a petition to deny the motion for summary affirmation and has been fighting for religious freedom since December 31st, 2013, when he filed his first case in federal court, 1:13 CV 2066.
Well, Jeff, thank you for your efforts. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Jeff, from Philadelphia.
I notified the president of this on and got a response on the 21st of May by 11 o'clock, and on the 22nd, the president of the United States held an impromptu news conference that stated all churches have to be open. I got a decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals in case 145183 on August 14, 2015, that said I have the right to sue over the Establishment Clause because of the Affordable Care Act. And I have actually called. I have actually called.
That was a great decision that you're referencing down in North Carolina in the Eastern District.
And I went to the Supreme Court of the United States as case 15-632, which has never been heard or anybody commented on. So I have not only sued there, but I want to file the motion in the case in New Orleans, 19-111, for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
And this is all based on religion.
Yeah, and you are to be commended for your efforts. That was a great decision by the federal district court judge in the Eastern District of North Carolina. And we'll be talking about that in our litigation that we filed in the Middle District, in which we're asking that the school closure order, as it pertains to parochial schools, be declared and deemed to be unconstitutional as a violation of the free exercise of religion clause of the First Amendment. So we're fighting here in the Middle District. You're fighting in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So thank you for your efforts, Jeff.
So this has been. The government cannot tell us how to pray. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, that's what the decision from Judge Deaver said. And essentially, since it's unconstitutional and an unconstitutional act is never legal, every business that lost business and had business interruption service can sue their insurance companies and the government for basically their loss of business.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Callers in here, excellent points. Richard from Mechanicsburg, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hi, Mark. It's good to hear from Daryl Metcalf. Since our rights are inalienable and cannot be separated from us, question, I know that people are doing lawsuits and they're going for impeachment, but lawsuits are usually tossed out for either lack of standing or wrong venue. And impeachment depends on enough votes and takes a long time. An old subject we've talked about before, anybody thought of quo warranto? That's a lot faster. And if you look up violation of rights under color of law and the consequences of that, as well as violation of oath of office.
Yeah, what we're doing in the litigation is we're trying to convince a judge that the executive orders were unconstitutional. And the court in the Middle District just ruled that denied our motion for a temporary restraining order. The judge does not believe that we're going to succeed on the merits. He did analyze the executive order under the traditional police powers test. It's a three-pronged test, and the judge believes that the executive orders satisfy that test, that they don't create an undue burden on the people subject to the orders, that they were reasonably necessary to achieve the purpose of the orders, and that they were in the public interest. So we are doing exactly what you say. We are challenging the constitutionality of these executive orders. So we're on the job.
The challenge you get in court is, again, it's possibly the wrong venue. It's like going to an outhouse looking for a gallon of milk. You're not going to get it there. Yeah, elections have consequences, and we elected a bunch of Democrats.
Richard, you're suggesting we file a quo warranto. If we do that, we have to file that in court. So
correct. But I thought the restrictions in the latitude that a judge would have on that, if you can demonstrate and prove one of the three questions is a yes, you got it. It's not up to discretion. And if necessary, then you can remove the judges. Because we have three openings filled the last time for the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, and they were all filled by people who lean to the left. And it's been a long time since three judgeships were open like that, and we as citizens failed in November a couple of years ago.
Well, I'll tell you, we did file. You know, we filed a petition in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And part of the petition is we challenged the statutory authority of the governor under the Disease Act The Disease Act is the Disease Prevention and Control Law of 1955. That is the statute that is on the books. It does authorize local health agencies and the Secretary of Health in certain areas where there is no local health agency to take certain actions to address the spread of communicable diseases. And two of those actions include isolation and quarantine powers. So they do have the power to isolate and quarantine, but only infected persons or those likely to have been exposed.
Exactly.
And regrettably, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did not opine on that particular challenge because they found that the governor has the authority under the Emergency Management Services Code. But interestingly, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court just a few days ago now declared the Wisconsin stay-at-home order to be unconstitutional.
Yeah, I saw that.
On the very same grounds that we challenged this governor's orders here in Pennsylvania, the Wisconsin Supreme Court found that the quarantine law of Wisconsin, which is very similar to the quarantine law in Pennsylvania, does not authorize the executive to quarantine the healthy. And that's exactly the argument we raised in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The court found a way not to address that particular challenge. Had they addressed that challenge, I don't think there's any way they could have ruled that the governor's orders were constitutional. But that was the court's decision in Pennsylvania, a 4-3 decision in PA. And Wisconsin was a 4-3 decision the other way with 4 conservative justices, I think, reaching the right decision there. But Richard, thanks from from Mechanicsburg. Thanks for the call. I've got to take a brief commercial break. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Let's get back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And thanks to our callers, we've heard some excellent points in reference to some good court decisions, one down in North Carolina, but Pennsylvania is not North Carolina, apparently. And our friend Richard from Mechanicsburg, who is very much focused on the quo warranto action, and that's where you challenge a public official to challenge him to explain and provide a legal source for a particular action that he has taken, among other ways to use quo warranto. And that's exactly what we did in the lawsuit. We challenged the governor's executive orders, challenged him. He had to explain where he got the statutory authority to issue the orders from. We presented federal, state, and also federal case law where we argued that the police powers that he used, the statutes that he used, the executive orders, violate the constitutional rights of the people of Pennsylvania. Regrettably, the courts are not ruling in our favor, but we'll keep at it. And we've got some other callers on the line. It looks like we have Harry. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Greetings from one major disloyal subject of His Excellency Tom Westerman Wolf. I was at the celebration yesterday, saw you speak. We had a lot of wonderful speakers. Kudos and God bless Representative Metcalf. I really admire his tenacity and his go-get-emness, and he's right. Hopefully we won't have to, but we should be taking to the streets. I do have a question that I hope you could answer, and I kind of heard Senator Mastriano on a couple of occasions kind of answer it. June 4th is supposed to be, from what I understand, that's supposed to be the conclusion of the governor's order, the expiration. I do hear some of the TV stations already talking about what the illustrious Governor Wolf is going to be doing on June 5th in terms of playing with his gubernatorial coloring book. So my question is, how likely do you think it is that June 5th he's going to want to start all over again? And if he does, what can the legislators do? To me, it's going to be a second nightmare if he does this all over again by virtue of the Emergency Management Act. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great point. On June 5th, apparently the governor is saying that all of Pennsylvania will at least be in the yellow zone, and apparently a dozen or so counties are moving into the green zone and will do so prior to June 5th. But you're right, in his reopen plan, he repeatedly states that he has the power and authority to move counties out of the yellow zone and back into the red zone, or out of the green zone and into the yellow or red zones. He claims he has that authority. Regrettably, because of the law, because of the decisions we've gotten in our cases, it looks like there's not going to be a court that's going to step in and stop him from doing so if he reverses course and determines, based upon whatever science or data, purported data, he uses to change his mind. I'm not sure the courts, because they've been so reluctant to intervene to date, I'm not sure they're going to intervene in the future if he changes his mind. I think, though, that it will cause a massive uprising by the people, and perhaps that will be enough to turn the tide, at least politically, and get him to back down. You know, we have been fighting him in the courts for over 2 months now, and every time we get close to a decision, he does something to take away one of my clients by moving them into the yellow zone, or to open up their business. He opened up my golf course client right at a critical moment in that case, and that's bad for the case, but great for the golf course and great for liberty and freedom and the people of Pennsylvania, and that's why we're doing this in the first place. We're trying to vindicate our rights in court, but it's also applying some pressure on the governor. So we're happy. We're happy about that. So
the General Assembly really can't do much if he decides to start this whole mess up again on June 5th, in essence, correct?
No, correct, because they don't have a supermajority vote. They can vote by concurrent resolution to terminate these orders, but he can simply veto them, and apparently they don't have the votes to override the veto. We explored that very early on in this constitutional debacle that we are now in.
Oh, my.
So that's where we are.
Okay. What about round-the-clock diner? I'm hearing conflicting reports from the liberal media. They said he got a couple citations or maybe even fines from the Department of Agriculture, and then I'm hearing that they didn't. What happens there if they keep running?
Yeah, well, I've read those reports. I'm not exactly sure because I don't represent them, so I don't know exactly what has happened. It's possible there was an emergency suspension action that would temporarily suspend their license, their permit to operate, but I hear they've retained counsel and they're challenging that. So that's typically the way those licensing actions work. It's typically an emergency suspension, not a revocation, but a suspension, and then you litigate that through the licensing boards. So I can't give you the actual facts or the actual legal position on that case because I'm just not involved.
Right.
But Harry, thanks for coming out to the Reopen Adams County rally yesterday, and
it was great.
Thanks for your words of encouragement and support, and we're going to keep the fight.
Thank you.
So, Harry, thanks for calling, and keep those phone lines open. Joe from Mechanicsburg, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm doing fair to Midland. Quick question, if I may. How's your dad doing?
Yeah,
I haven't seen him in a long time.
My father's actually doing pretty well. And
good. He used to sell me furniture. Tell him I asked about him, if you would, please.
I will do.
But that's not why I'm calling.
What's your last name?
Stevick.
Stevick. Oh, my goodness. Yes, that was a beautiful furniture store in Carlisle.
Okay. H.R. Bill 6666. What do you think of that?
Tell me about it.
It's using some form of government action to come into your house and make sure you're immunized against certain diseases. No, neither do I, especially given the number.
Yeah, I don't like that. We'll have to see if that passes. Now, our liberal friends will cite a United States Supreme Court decision from over 100 years ago, the Jacobson decision, Jacobson v. Massachusetts, in which Mr. Jacobson opposed a mandatory smallpox vaccination. Now, he ended up losing that battle in court and was required to be vaccinated against his will. And our friends, the governor and the Secretary of Health, they've used that case in the cases that we've fought as a support for the executive order, the business closure and stay-at-home orders. And our point is, well, a forcing someone to receive a vaccination that is proven effective for an illness that back in the early 1900s had devastating consequences to a wide swath of the demographics of the state is one thing, but forcibly removing someone from his business is entirely different. Forcing someone to stay in his home is entirely different. It's not a vaccination action. It's a much broader and much more sweeping action. And so that's the argument that has risen in our case. Thanks for calling, Joe. I'll tell my father you said hello. Looking out of time based upon the music being played. Thank you for listening to the Marc Scarinci Show. Tune in every Saturday, 1 o'clock on WHP and WEJS. Thanks for listening. Have a beautiful Memorial Day weekend.